partially shadowed by Donald Trump's outrageous statements to several hundred generals from all over the world gathered in Washington yesterday that he wanted to use U.S. cities as training grounds, his words, for the military, was his striking low energy and rambling during his hour-plus speech. From the New York Times reporting on yesterday's address, quote, "For a 79-year-old, he's often shown a great deal of energy, but he seemed a bit sapped Tuesday. As his remarks went on, his voice took on a more monotonous quality. A day earlier, when he spoke at the White House while standing beside Mr. Netanyahu, Trump sounded out of breath at times," end quote. And from the Washington Post, quote, "Trump, who draws energy from instantaneous feedback, appeared to speak more slowly than usual and in a monotone, seemingly affected by a largely mum audience," end quote. It is true the generals were a different type of audience than a raucous MAGA Trump fest. Military brass are not supposed to react to political speeches. They are supposed to remain apolitical, and they did. But Trump's demeanor has led to different questions, to questions about whether or not Donald Trump is unwell. Yesterday at this hour, as we were coming on the air in this hour, we started with Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean. She joined us to talk about the government shutdown, but literally seconds before she came on the air, as we saw her getting ready in the shot on the wall, we saw a confrontation take place between the Congresswoman and Speaker Mike Johnson. And she confronted him about a lot of things. Frankly, all the things you want to see Democrats fighting for and saying to Republicans, she said and did. And one of them was Donald Trump's fitness. Watch what our cameras caught and note how his immediate response is not to say she's wrong about any of it.
The president is unhinged. He is unwell.
What are you doing? A lot of folks on your side are too. I don't control.
Oh my God, please. That performance in front of the generals? That
I didn't see it.
It's so dangerous. You know I serve on Foreign Affairs and Appropriations. This is a collision of those two things. Our allies are looking elsewhere. Our enemies are laughing.
I just left
you
the
have a
speaker's,
president who is unwell.
A lot of folks on your side are also unwell. Okay. The speaker said he missed the speech. We know a lot of folks on that side tend to catch the program, so we put together a little highlight reel.
I've never walked into a room so silent before. That's enough to buy a lot of battleships, Admiral, to use an old term. I think we should maybe start thinking about battleships, by the way. You know, when I walk downstairs, like I'm on stairs, like these stairs, I walk very slowly. Nobody has to set a record. Just try not to fall, because it doesn't work out well. A few of our presidents have fallen, and it became a part of their legacy. And it was really a stupid person that works for them mentioned the word nuclear. We can't let people throw around that word. I call it the N-word. There are two N-words, and you can't use either of them. But the firemen go up on ladders, and you have people shooting at them while they're up on ladders. I don't even know if anybody heard that. And I said, don't talk about it much, but I think you have to. Our firemen are incredible.
But I defended them anyway. One of our next guests, Tom Nichols, echoes what Congresswoman Dean brought up with the speaker, writing this in The Atlantic, that Trump, quote, is not okay. Quote, in 1973, an Air Force nuclear missile officer named Harold Herring asked a simple question during a training session. Quote, how can I know that an order I received to launch my missiles came from a sane president? The question cost him his career. Military members are trained to execute orders, not to question them. But today, both the man who can order the use of nuclear arms and the man who would likely verify such an order gave disgraceful and unnerving performances in Quantico. How many officers left the room asking themselves Major Herring's question? That question is where we start the hour with some of our favorite experts and friends. Staff writer at The Atlantic and a contributor to The Atlantic Daily Newsletter, Tom Nichols is here. Also joining us, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling is here. Also joining us at the table, former Assistant U.S. Attorney and President of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, Maya Wiley is here. Tom, I'm sure you heard from all sorts of your own sources. I heard from a couple of mine. And I was I was interested in the fact that this was the first issue they raised. I mean, of course, there's the objectionable line about our cities being training grounds. There was the whole Hegseth debacle, if you will. But the first thing my sources raised was how Trump seemed. And I wonder if that's what you heard and that's what inspired the piece.
What inspired the piece was Trump. That as I was watching it in real time and I was looking at the audience, and I've sat with and lectured to military audiences for most of my adult life, I just had to wonder what they were thinking, because, you know, military officers don't go to MAGA rallies. Senior officers don't have a lot of time to sit and watch footage on cable news. And I think for most of them, this was the first time they'd really gotten a major helping of 180 proof undiluted Donald Trump, and just had to sit there for almost an hour and just watch him. And I assume, you know, that, and I did hear afterwards that, you know, a lot of folks were like, he just doesn't seem well. He's not okay. I'm not a doctor. I'm not making a diagnosis. I'm saying as a layperson and a man of advancing years myself, that I looked at the president and I thought he's not okay. And that it's not just his physical demeanor. I mean, I think for too long, we haven't been willing to talk about the weird, rambling, you know, what the president tries to call it, the weave. It's not the weave. It is some kind of emotional disordered condition where he just can't hold a thought in his head. And I think when you're lecturing, speaking to 800 admirals and generals, that audience is going to notice it a lot more than the MAGA audiences at rallies who are looking at their phone or laughing or, you know, not really paying attention. And it just disturbed me, and I thought it was time to say something about it.
General Hertling, your thoughts?
Yeah, Tom's right. I heard from quite a few of the folks that I used to serve with who were in the audience last night or yesterday, and heard some of the same thing, that it was meandering was the word that came up with one. And it seemed to be disconnected thoughts. And I'd agree completely with Tom. When you know you're going into an audience of that kind of folk, the people who are the generals and admirals and their senior enlisted advisors, you know you got to be on your game. You got to talk straight. You really got to be precise in your language. In fact, that's one of the things I learned at the War College from a guy like Tom, saying, you know, precise language is critical and communication is important when you get to the strategic ranks, because what you say is what people act on. One of the individuals that I talked to last night, said that, and I know this guy, he likes to take very meticulous notes. And he was saying he gave up taking notes halfway through the speech because none of them were connecting and were not something he could take back to his troops. And that's sort of a sad thing to say when you're talking about the commander-in-chief.
Maya, let me just put out everything that's in the public record on this topic, because I think that's helpful. In 2017, then Republican Senator Bob Corker tweeted this, quote, "It is a shame that the White House has become an adult daycare center." Someone obviously missed their shift this morning. Bob Corker went on to introduce legislation to try to minimize or take away some of an American president's nuclear authorities as a senator. The measure failed. In 2018, then writing as anonymous, but we've since learned that it was Miles Taylor, wrote this: "Given the instability many witnessed, there were early whispers within the cabinet of invoking the 25th Amendment, which would start a complex process for removing the president, but no one wanted to precipitate a constitutional crisis. So we will do what we can to steer the administration in the right direction until one way or another it's over." From 2017 until it ended, every reporter covering the White House had Signal and WhatsApp on their phone, because people inside the White House leaked all the time about the things that were happening. That is where the body of information came from, people inside the House. And I would say after the January 6th, after the insurrection, we heard Kevin McCarthy's voice on tape from two journalists who I think at the time were at Politico talking about the 25th Amendment a second time. So I'd never heard it being discussed by senior people ever. For Trump, the first time around, there were two instances that became public where Republican allies talked about removing him from office using the 25th Amendment.
Well, I think this is one of the things that's so frustrating for many of us in this moment, which is we had a presidential election. We have that whole record that you just shared, Nicole. And then we had a presidential election where so much attention was being given to Joe Biden's age without what felt like equal time and attention to the capabilities of Donald Trump. That was very frustrating just as a matter of reporting, and that seemed very unbalanced. But I also want to go one step deeper, because we're talking about a level, and we heard the word earlier, unhinged, not just unwell, unhinged. And so it's both about what does it mean to have a president who has the capacity, the mental and other capacity to be a commander-in-chief. But we're also watching this unhinged, unwell person doing what I would consider to be an attempt at a propaganda walk in front of and using the nation's military leaders as a prop in that propaganda for a discussion that included things that were outwardly racist, that were suggesting that our war was with quote unquote inner cities as we're watching crossing the red line, and something that is disturbing to many in the military about how we're even seeing them be used. So in addition to the nuclear codes, it's actually the way in which this is becoming propaganda to wage war on quote unquote enemies within, on us, on a man who just talked about the N-word not being able to use. I'm sorry, he's someone who has reportedly used the N-word, but has an administration now and a secretary who sees it as in their mission